Howdy everyone, welcome back to Hex Center. Today we're going to be taking a look at some advanced concepts in the game, and the first one we're going to start with is Escalation. This is really going to take up the majority of our time for this video, so we'll cover a few more later, but Escalation is a brand spanking new mechanic unique to the Hex TCG game. So far, in the alpha, they've released 5 of the 6 possible escalation cards, one for each of the different shard types. These cards are as follows. The Wild Shard has a card called Crash of Beasts, Ruby has Ragefire, Sapphire has Chronic Madness, Diamond has Eternal Youth, and the unreleased card we have is Relentless Corruption for Blood. Now, the interesting thing about each of these cards is that they have a bolded number in their text that after every play, this number doubles. So if you play 1 Crash of Beasts, you normally get a 1 3 for 3/3 Rhino token that gets put into play. The next copy of Crash of Beasts that you play, though, is going to give you 2 Rhinos. The third copy will give you 4 Rhinos. The fourth copy gives you 8 Rhinos. So it is that logarithmic doubling that occurs. Ragefire is a 2 cost, 2 ruby threshold, 2 damage spell. So it goes 2, 4, 8, 16. Every one of these cards does this. And the next most interesting thing that each card does is that when the card is played, it shuffles back into the deck. So what this does is it causes some really great interactions, but also some very powerful value as the cards are played throughout a game. So let's take a quick example, and let's go ahead and go back to the wonderful card Crash of Beasts in the Wild Shard. The really interesting thing about what occurs with escalation cards is they shuffle back into the deck, allowing them to be used multiple times. So in a 60 card deck, you have a 1 in 15 chance of pulling this on your initial draw, but the ability to pull them gets greater and greater as the game goes on, because you have fewer cards left in the deck, and they always replace themselves. So it's putting something very similar to like an enrage timer into a PvP game. Most of the time, a player who is being affected by the escalation card will be able to take the first one, maybe the second use, fairly well, especially if they're a well-prepared, top-tier player. The third one creates a great deal of value no matter which escalation card is used. The fourth one is devastating because that fourth doubling is just an exceedingly large amount of value. And that's the interesting thing that occurs with these, and it is a great debate in the community right now on whether or not this doubling effect is really overly powerful. The reason for this is because it is possible to pull every one of these cards in the opening hand or within the first few draws, and it swings the balance of power very quickly. The question it comes down to is, do decks ever want to not run escalation cards? And this is the debate that's going on. My personal opinion is that decks at this point in time, in the first set, and without all of the cards existing in the alpha yet, every deck has to run them. In the current environment, if it never changed, they would be overpowered. But as we get more cards, we get the cards that can deal with, that can make major impacts to the effectiveness of escalation cards. When those come in, that will change, and the perception of them will still be strong, because multiple plays of these cards are just value on top of value on top of value. What I think will change the power of these escalation cards is when Cryptozoic opens up their tool chest when creating new cards. And I think their effectiveness over the long term will be steady, but less than it is now. And that will bring them into an appropriate balance. But as of this point in time, if you are running a mono shard deck or a dual shard deck, you need to include a significant number of escalation cards in your deck to be able to compete. So anyone participating in the streaming tournaments should probably be running escalation cards. The reason that these have such a powerful effect on the game is because they enable a couple types of behaviors. They make games a little bit more chance-based because of their value stacking over and over again. That repeated play may be too much value. That's not to say that it's overpowered yet. Right now it feels that way because we don't have everything. I know that once we get counter cards, it'll be easier to not run escalation. It may even be easier to run one of an escalation card. That way that you can make your opponent believe that you're going to be able to do quite a bit more than you could, and it just serves a purpose of being a multiple that recurs. But what is insane at this point in time in the development not to be running a 4 of each available escalation that you can run. The other interesting aspect of the escalation cards is that in a long, drawn-out game, you will not deck. But now you can play an escalation card from your hand. It goes right back into your deck. It is possible, though unlikely, that a deck will get down to those final few cards, those 4 to 2 cards, and be able to continuously replenish itself just by playing and creating massive effects on the field. This specific mechanic gets very, very rough with a card like Eternal Youth, which is the Diamond escalation card. Eternal Youth allows you to gain 5 health, then 10, then 20, then 40, then 80, then 160, and then 320 health. Even a full deck on its setup, hitting for his 20-30 damage a turn, can't keep up with a deck that is constantly doubling its health, because you'd have to be able to put enough resources and field enough troops to continuously do that damage in a doubling fashion. I still don't think it's there yet. I think it's highly powerful. I think it is fun and interesting, but it's not degenerative to the play environment yet. Not every deck has to run the escalations to be top-notch and amazing. When we get the full set in, we're going to have a very amazing shift that occurs within the alpha metagame as we go into the beta. Now, that being said, when we do move into the beta, make sure that you get a play set of every single escalation card. They are going to be powerful cards. Even if they tune down some of these effects, they are going to be powerful and amazing cards. So this means that when you're looking at this from a value perspective, you'll want to draft these. You'll want to get these from the auction house. That may make these cards a little bit chasey in the beginning, but their market will stabilize once we get enough of the cards into the environment. And that's going to be something to keep an eye on. And let's take a quick look at those cards just so we can see them. So we've talked about Crash of Beasts, we've talked about Ragefire, we've talked about Chronic Madness, and Eternal Youth. We have one left that is about to enter the alpha, and that's Relentless Corruption. As it's printed and spoiled thus far, it is a card that allows you to take the top card of your opponent's deck, change the threshold on that card to blood, and put it in your hand. So this essentially allows you to draw a card from the top of your opponent's deck. So it's going to start off as 1, then 2, then 4, then 8. It has an amazing synergy with Chronic Madness, because Chronic Madness can mill your opponent down to just their escalation cards, and then your Relentless Corruption can draw them from your opponent so that they deck out. There are other cards that pair well together, but of the escalations, those two seem to have the best synergy thus far. Ragefire, which is the one that deals damage that doubles, seems to be a moderate counter to Eternal Youth. The two scale differently. Ragefire has a greater versatility than Eternal Youth. The Eternal Youth will outstrip Ragefire because Ragefire just mimics the doubling while Eternal Youth starts at that 5 life. The Wild One, on the other hand, Crash of Beasts, follows a very different logarithmic pattern. It allows you to put a creature into play, and if this creature stays in play, you have a building pool of damage that occurs. And I think it's one of the favorites because of staying power of creatures in the game. So it allows you to create one 3/3/3 Rhino token. The second one allows you to create two 3/3/3s. Well, that gives you a damage potential of 9 points on your second play. Your fourth play puts in 4 3/3 tokens, giving you 21 points of possible damage. Your fourth play gives you 8 additional tokens, giving you a net of 53 potential damage. So if you start comparing the damage output or the health gain output from the use of the escalation, you actually end up outpacing the diamond card because of the build that occurs. And I think that is one of the real draws of Crash of Beasts, is the permanence of the creatures that it puts in. But that's also why they gave it the lowest doubling for the 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16, because of that permanence. Chronic Madness and Relentless Corruption don't really compare to that damage potential, but they do have a pretty decent synergy with Eternal Youth, because Eternal Youth gives you that pillow factor, but that is then run over by Wild. What we should glean from this is that there is synergy that occurs here. These cards are designed, they're developed, they're well thought out, they're meant to pair off of each other. That means that it is a crucial and essential part of the metagame, and it's meant to be that way. We may have a few early growing pains in our constructed formats because of these cards, but let's be honest, it really spices things up and it keeps games from going way too long. These put a counter on how slow a game can get, because the fourth play of each of these cards is almost game ending. So this is our look into the Escalation concept. There's still a little bit deeper that can be gone on here, and there's a lot of inter-card actions that can be done for each of these. We could separate and pull an episode on every single Escalation card in and of itself, and they each have their own themes, their own powers, their own synergies within their shard and with their analogous shards to pull off. But in general, Escalation as a mechanic is powerful because of its doubling. It's extra powerful because of its effects on the deck, and at this point in time in the alpha and probably in the early beta, they are format defining. Make sure you get your 4 copies. Make sure that you get the best value out of these cards that you can. They are great. They're must-haves. They're exciting cards. I want to thank everyone for watching Hex Hunter. We'll be doing different advanced concepts as well as introducing more information on our MMO TCG series. Don't forget to tune in every other Tuesday for the General's Tent podcast. Function and I will be talking about all things Hex, everything from what might be going on in the tournament community, new cards that are released, alpha updates, and just general Hex news. So until our next time, I'm Mokog, and this is Hex Hunter.